Thank you. All right, welcome everyone here at Jesse Mays and also online to the City of North Plains City Council regular session meeting, Monday, October 3rd, 2022 at 7 o'clock. Please, those in the hall, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Keep forgetting to use that. It's such a powerful tool. All right, thank you so much. Lori, roll call.
Thank you. Counselor Page?
Here.
Counselor Kendall?
Here.
Counselor Martinez?
Here.
Counselor Bateman?
Here.
Counselor Sheldon?
Present.
Counselor Smith?
Here.
And Mayor Linehan.
Here. Thank you. Item number 5 on our agenda is the consent agenda. Tonight we are approving the October 3rd, 2022 regular session agenda, and we're also approving the September 19th, 2022 City Council minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes that we need to be aware of? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as it's been submitted and presented in our packet.
All right, we have a first by Councilor Sheldon, seconded by Councilor Page. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. Item 6 is our public comment. This is the time where we wish folks in the audience that wish to speak on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here in Jesse Mays Hall willing and wishing to speak? Let the record show that, or anything online.
I did not receive anything prior to this evening's meeting.
Thank you. All right, item number 7 is presentation is the Oregon Semiconductor Competitiveness Task Force presentation given by Keith Levitt of the Port of Portland. And it looks like Keith is online. Hello,
Hello there.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come in via Zoom. Appreciate it.
Andy.
Yeah, hi Keith, this is Andy. I'm just off screen, city manager. I've allowed screen share, so if you need to use that, you can do so. And glad you joined it. You were going in and out there, so I wasn't sure if you were on the freeway or something. So
Yeah, I was a little worried about it. I had to hang up a couple times and came back in, and glad it worked out here.
great.
So yeah, I do. I didn't hear the prelude there, but I will need to share slides.
Go for it. You should be able to. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give that a try right now.
You know, Keith, we've had some brief conversations about the semiconductor competitiveness. We've had some in-depth conversation as well. So feel free to, if you need to give us a great overview. Looking forward to your presentation.
Great, yeah, and you'll hear me move fairly briefly through some slides that, yeah, if you've got a fair amount of background on this, I can kind of get to the what I know will be the most interesting part of the discussion, so we can open up a dialogue. So again, my name's Keith Levitt, and I'm the Chief Trade and Equitable Development Officer at the Port of Portland. And it's been a real privilege to be a part of the Semiconductor Competitiveness Task Force. I've been providing the leadership to the Industrial Land Subcommittee, particularly the group of experts and staff folks that have been doing all of that work. Just a little bit on the port. As some of you may know about the Port of Portland, we've got 3 distinct lines of business. We've got 3 airports, including the Hillsborough Airport, Troutdale, PDX, We have 4 marine terminals. We have 5 very large industrial properties, and it's our focus on international trade, and it's our focus on and expertise around industrial property development that really brings us to the semiconductor space. We've really been focused on shared prosperity as an economic development overriding goal. We want to help provide jobs that close disparity gaps in our economy, and advanced manufacturing is a big area of focus for us. Not just the semiconductor space. You hear a lot from the port these days on mass timber. We are converting an old marine terminal in Portland to be a major innovation hub for mass timber. Very fascinating project. We're excited about the metals industry in East Multnomah County and throughout the state. So advanced manufacturing is a big part of what we're focused on these days. A lot of you are aware this is a large task force. It was co-chaired by the governor, Senator Wyden, Maria Pope. The work went on over the period from, I'll call it early May, all the way through last week. They had another task force meeting. This task force will stay together throughout, particularly throughout the next year and maybe even more of the CARES Act, which we'll talk more about with at the federal level. And then also a lot of the recommendations coming from this task force are going to the 2023 legislative session, and you'll hear, and you won't be surprised, these are ambitious recommendations. You know, one of the I've been doing industrial development for a long time, and when you're kind of debating the merits of industrial sites or zoning, or even urban growth boundary decisions, and you're doing it kind of in the abstract and just saying industrial without a good overarching clear economic strategy, it tends not to be it can be more of an academic conversation that is looking at the rearview mirror around 20 years of growth and what are the trend lines for the next 20 years. And so it's that kind of process that having a really well thought out strategy like the statement that you read here with what we call the North Star is really important. And I think it'll be particularly important heading into the next legislative session. So what are we about with this work? We're about, doubling down on advanced manufacturing, particularly with research and development in the manufacturing of semiconductor chips. We want to continue to occupy the leadership space in the United States in that area, but also in the world. And in order to do that, we have got to be very open to not only growing the base and the supplier base and the manufacturers that we have, but we have to be open to new investments that are sure to be coming along, and if we can get a lot of these recommendations put into place. A lot of eyes are on us. There's a lot at stake here. I'm not going to belabor this slide. I'm sure you're aware of all of this. The big drivers, the context here, the supply chain shifts, COVID really changed everything. Economic resiliency, not relying on foreign countries for our chip manufacturing, doing a lot more of what Intel has done in Oregon, is really where we're headed. And it's in a kind of in the face of economic forces around innovation that are just driving the demand side for chips over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why we see auto production being affected so greatly, because increasingly automobiles require silicon wafer chips in order to be manufactured. And when chip production is down, all other industries are going to be down. So there's a big shift in the US to reshoring, onshoring chip manufacturing in our country. So, midway through the work of the task force, the CHIPS Act passed Congress. poured gas, on a pretty good fire already. This is an incredible opportunity, $52 billion of investment through incentives, through tax credits, through direct appropriations, very much focused on R&D. Oregon should compete favorably for a lot of this investment. Again, we've got to get these recommendations moving forward, but we're very excited. But the urgency is very high. The timing is right now. And this slide, some of you have probably seen. This is shows over the next 5 years the kind of investments that are going to be coming out of the CHIPS Act at the federal level, and front loaded over the next year. So there is a lot of work being done right now to be able, with Business Oregon, with the state, working with OSU and others, to begin to get ready to apply for major grants around research and development and around manufacturing. This is kind of the punchline, I would say, of the report. In August, the task force produced their set of recommendations, and they're focused on innovation, incentives, workforce, regulatory, and land and infrastructure. You can see there's a lot of opportunity in the innovation category to be in line for a center of excellence, let's call it, a campus approach to being one of the leading areas of the U.S., whether it's regionally around the United States or it's in a couple of different places, to do kind of the cutting edge R&D work, using the universities that we have, working with Intel and others. And that's a real exciting opportunity. The incentives, it's about modernizing a lot of the same incentives that we currently have used in Oregon. We've been at this. One of our big advantages, we are a leader. We've been at this since the 1990s and even before that. And a lot of the incentives were structured at that time. They've been around for 30 years. We're going to need to, what I would call, modernize those incentives. Some of them are actually going to sunset during the 2023 session, and we're going to need to not only modernize the incentives, but make sure the sunset gets lifted on the enterprise zone program, R&D tax credit, and gain share type investment vehicles that allow us to do industrial projects. Oregon is, we maintain a real leadership role. You look at the total employment here, 40,000, 15% of U.S. employment is in Oregon. We're number 3 in that category, punching way above our size, our weight. And when you look at the location quotient, kind of a geeky term here, but it's employment given relative to the size of our state. And we are by far the most concentrated employment area in the country for this sector. I'm sure you've seen this slide before. The big yellow circles are the manufacturers, the blue circles are the suppliers. The size kind of represents the scale of employment, with Intel dwarfing everyone else. And you can see Lam there as a major supplier. This is a diverse sector. They all have kind of different land and infrastructure requirements, and that offers a real opportunity to a lot of communities to participate in the growth that we see coming. And it's really good equitable economic development. I honestly didn't appreciate, I knew this was a major jobs sector. I guess my perception heading into this work was, these were really high-end engineering, PhD level positions. And it's really almost 50-50 as far as middle class, middle wage jobs, highly accessible to communities that need that support. having a high school or to a community college degree. So, not only does this sector yield an incredible amount of tax revenue that supports all of the services of state government, but it's providing high volume of jobs and high quality jobs across really all of the spectrum of jobs. This is really another kind of way of showing the report and the recommendation. The overriding goal here is build a world-class innovation ecosystem. The cost delta on the incentive side, we had a lot of discussion at the task force about, how do you compete with Texas and New York and Ohio, and some of these states provide incentives at the level Oregon just typically does not. We don't really need to go to that level, but we do need to close some of this gap, because our major advantage is talent and workforce, and the place that we hold in the research and development space in this sector. We need to double down on our strengths. We need to mitigate a bit for the weaknesses on the incentive side. And then on environmental regulations, it's about certainty of permitting, it's about timing. And industrial land, I guess I'm being kind of strangely biased on industrial land. I think it is the one that requires the heaviest lift. We have a long way to go to get to where we need to be to have land available to take advantage of these opportunities. This is really the punchline of our subcommittee and ultimately what the report says about land and infrastructure. And I'll premise all of this. I'm going to get into the land part. What I'm not going to be able to give you tonight is the solutions and the specifics around recommendations that get us to solutions. I'm going to tee up a problem statement and give you a sense for where we think we need to be in about a year. And that's what you see on the 2 sites of 500 acres, 4 sites of 50 to 100 acres, 8 sites of 15 to 35 acres. There's rhyme and reason to those numbers and the specifics. It came out of a lot of expert testimony from site selectors that have been engaged in this industry for a long time. You can see we don't really have 1,000-acre sites out there the way that Ohio was able to put together, but we in the short term really need to get tangibly focused on these types of sites. And if a year from now we are talking and we are out busy, the port or a patient public developer or a jurisdiction is armed with resources to go out and start assembling these sites, then we feel like we're doing all of the urgent short-term actions that we need to get into this game, if you will. We have long-term systemic issues in our planning process. The time it takes a lot that I know a lot of you are very well aware of, the time it takes to get land zoned appropriately, the cost of planning for jurisdictions, all of those issues need to be dealt with over a longer period of time. But what we've focused on is what is the minimum we have to do in Oregon to get in play for these major investments. And I'll say I really like the tangible nature of this recommendation because it's ambitious but doable. We can get this done with focused effort and advocacy next legislative session. This is a little bit on the next couple of slides is how we got here, but some of you are aware that we have a tried and true methodology for looking at site readiness in the metropolitan, within the urban growth boundary, in the metro region. We've been doing this since 2011. We just did the snapshot in 2022, and I'll show you what that looks like. But what we have done with a consistent apples to apples methodology over that 11-year period is look at tiering of sites based on their readiness. So tier 1 is market ready. You can go get a building permit and turn dirt in 6 months. Tier 2 is 6 months to a year and a half, and tier 3 is a year and a half and beyond. And obviously a balanced inventory coming in each of those tiers is ideal. It's a lot more lumpy than that, as we all know, with market demand for industrial sites. And this is really the snapshot for where we're at today. And what's troubling to me, and I've been involved in all of these inventories, what's troubling is the total that you see on the bottom. We were trending a little bit downward into 2017, but we went kind of off a cliff from 2017 to 2022. We are truly without sites inside the UGB, and that's why the work that you're doing to bring more land in is critically important and on point. So we have a systemic problem with the way we're bringing land both into the urban growth boundary, and then once it's in, getting it up to a point where it's available to be developed. And I don't know if I said this, but these are all of this, these inventories are 25 acres and above. So those are the kinds of sites that are suitable for like major manufacturing and other major industrial processes. One of the other big challenges that we have that wasn't as prevalent in prior snapshots that we took over the years is just the tier 3 sites are the biggest sites, and they're very, very constrained. A lot of rock quarries, a lot of sites like the port owns number 1 and number 2. Those sites, West Hayden Island, Southwest Quad at the airport, they're not going to be used for semiconductor expansion for all kinds of reasons. the Springwater corridor out in the Gresham area, highly constrained, highly unlikely to be developed in any meaningful time horizon. So, you know, again, these are inside the urban growth boundary. They're kind of counted, but it's a lot of these sites are highly unlikely to be brought to the market in the window of opportunity that we've been discussing. The yellow sites, you can see in North Hillsborough, there's an obvious opportunity there. The port owns a couple of those yellow sites, and then we have one of the only green sites. It's a little one out in, looks little on the screen here. It's 50 acres out in Gresham, and then Forest Grove has one of the other tier 1 sites, and that's it. That's pretty much not having sites available to recruit for the semiconductor industry. So where are we going with all of this? You know, infrastructure costs are the largest constraint for bringing industrial sites to a readiness state. And I'd say infrastructure is particularly important to the semiconductor industry. The availability of utility resources, stormwater, waste, all of those aspects are critical to this cluster. And so we are reviewing a robust inventory. We are taking that inventory and applying semiconductor site criteria. We will have a short list that we then do a bunch of cost analysis on, that to a point where we are able to then make recommendations to the legislature around the kind of funding that would need to be put into play to bring those sites to readiness. The other thing I would just say is, permits, wetland mitigation, planning. There will need to be a fast track for sites of statewide significance that meet certain criteria. The toolbox that we reference here is going to have to include regulatory I'll say innovations around the way that projects can move more quickly through the various permit and planning timeframes. And again, if we're dealing with a universe of early action sites as our recommendations are focused, we will learn a lot from how to do that fast track process, how to make those investments, and it'll tell us a lot about longer term what the system is going to need in the by way of reform in the future to make sure that we have an industrial land inventory that's available for investment. So that is, I'm sorry. Last thing I guess I'll just reference, and I'll go to this slide because it shows Rondler Acres. Rondler Acres, some of you may know, was a lot of great foresight by the city of Hillsborough many years ago. It was assembled when we could use eminent domain. The threat of condemnation helped drive a lot of land assembly. Urban renewal was also an important tool, and I know that's something that you're considering, and it's still in play. But what we don't have with land assembly is eminent domain. That got struck down by the courts years ago. And so for economic development projects, it simply is not a tool. And just what that tells me as a public developer of property who has assembled large sites, it's a grind. You need to work with the brokers, you need to have willing sellers, you're doing arm's length transactions. It's quite intensive and time consuming. It gets done, and it needs to get done, but condemnation is certainly not an authority that can be used to do this. And that is it. And I'll stop sharing, see if I can do this the right way here.
Thank you, Keith. I'm going to just open this up for discussion as far as I'm sure that counselors have questions. Andy.
Yeah, I did want to say, and Bill would probably be more prepared to do this. He did a lot of the legwork and working with the port and Keith and their semiconductor task force recommendations. But the reason we didn't really set this up, the reason Keith is here is because Bill has been working with Keith and others that are part of this process, just letting them know what we're doing in North Plains with the economic opportunities analysis. We're outside the Portland area metro UGB. We have our own UGB, but we are also looking towards what they've done in Hillsborough and being part of the Silicon Forest economy. So that our EOA kind of dovetailed nicely with what their group's work has been doing over the summer, to where we had those conversations, opened up some avenues, and got a little bit more on the radar. And that really is what led Keith here today. So I definitely commend Bill for being reaching out to those folks and kind of setting this up.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Keith, and I see Doug is there as well. Yeah, so no, true. Our EOA was basically done when the task force was formed and started their work. And as they continued on what they were working on, and we had landed on identifying what our opportunity was, that you're all familiar with, we did get an audience with Keith and Doug and a few others with the Industrial Land Subcommittee. And Dan Diaz, who's the Economic and Community Development Director at the City of Hillsborough, he also works with that subcommittee. And the timing and the types of properties that are around the city candidate for expansion, and the property owners who are all very willing and on board to be brought into the city, and they all have very large parcels. We kind of have a very fortunate combination of factors, being near a freeway, very large parcels, very few owners, all very willing and happy to be brought into the urban growth boundary for future development, including industrial development. It just made sense to reach out, and they saw what we were doing and were interested in our progress. Now, implementing and kind of wrapping up our EOA and our land needs are basically supported by their findings. We had no idea how much opportunity there would be based on the CHIPS Act. We didn't. But some of the opportunities our EOA identified are very similar in a portion of what they have found. So also there's consistency between our effort and some of what they're, a small part of what they've identified. So we look forward to working with them. You all know we recently were awarded a rather large planning grant from DLCD to concept plan our urban growth boundary expansion areas. And so the timing of what Keith is talking about and being able to work with them moving forward as much as possible, if we can, it's very good timing. And so I think North Plains can potentially have a role to play.
Speaking of DLC, I do want to acknowledge Laura Kelly online. Laura was here, I think, early September, wasn't that right? A couple weeks, few weeks back with Kirsten Green, deputy director there, to kind of talk through and support our EOA. So I'm glad she's here because our EOA will be on the planning commission agenda next week. So we're kind of, all of this work that's start, stop for good reasons is kind of coming to a head. And it's kind of fortuitous timing with the task force coming up with findings as we're rounding out our EOA.
Are there any questions or comments from council for Keith? Keith, I know that we're, in my personal opinion, I feel like that we are in good hands with our staff, being super mindful as we move forward with this endeavor. And our interest in growing our community from a bedroom community to a community and enhancing our livability for the residents of our community is extremely important to us. We want to be able to definitely provide, jobs so people can work, play, and recreate in North Plains. And I know that I'm really excited just to see, as we move forward in this process, I'm excited to see our potential, our future potential. And I appreciate the presentation tonight and the collaborative effort of our team here in North Plains and with DLCD and with all the other folks that are on this very important task force. So thank you for coming tonight and sharing this presentation. And I'll just give it one more shout out just to see if anyone has any other comments.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that you are in really good hands with your staff, and we will definitely continue to work together as we proceed forward on all of this. So thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. There's nothing else here. I guess no one else has a comment or question, so I bid you a wonderful evening.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we have our ordinances. We have a couple of ordinances this evening. Hopefully you have all had time to review them. And Emily is not on the call, so I'm just going to go ahead and defer this to you, Andy.
Okay.
Ordinances for the camping code, we'll look at that first.
Yeah.
And then the public indecency ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, Emily had to go to another meeting at the same exact time. It really, all she tried to do was encapsulate the council's comments over 2 sessions related to our public camping code. And then obviously the last meeting we discussed public indecency. We'll get to that one later. But the additions off the top of my head, since I don't have it in front of me, were based on doing more with the sidewalk width, adding in the Ghost Creek Trail and the West Union Boardwalk and pedestrian bridge to include those in areas where camping would not be allowed. So with that, I don't think much else changed. Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that right? Yeah, that's correct, from last meeting to this, so it should all be there. And this would be just a first reading tonight. It would still take two. And then 30 days to go into effect.
So we'll conduct the first reading, and then after that motion, then there would be a motion to approve the first reading, correct? Okay. I did have one question about the addition of Ghost Creek pedestrian path. And so as we expand that path, that trail around the community, I noticed that the language in this is really specific to just what it is today. But when it changes in a year or 2 or 5 years from now, do we need to come back and then update this ordinance to address the expansion or potential expansion?
Perhaps there is a way, this is where I'm turning, I don't want to change things on the fly. I was going to say, there may be a way to include some language about Ghost Creek path extending to 314th Avenue in the future.
It's not critical, but I think that it's important. And if it's something that we just need to come back and address and amend the ordinance or whatever, that's totally fine too.
That may be the best way. We don't know. We're still planning to move ahead with that, but it could be 2-3 years before that thing is done. So maybe we just address it at a time, but thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
Because it is still.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. So I am going to need a motion to conduct the first reading of ordinance number 482.
I'll move to conduct the first reading of ordinance 482 and ordinance amending section 13114 of the North Plains Municipal Code regarding camping prohibited in certain places.
All right, we have a motion on the table by Councilor Sheldon, seconded by Councilor Page. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. Ordinance number 482 is an ordinance amending section 131.14 of the North Plains Municipal Code regarding camping prohibited in certain places. All right, may I have a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 482?
I'll move to approve the first reading of ordinance 482.
Second. All right, we have a motion on the table by Councilor Sheldon, seconded by Councilor Martinez. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. The next ordinance this evening is the first reading of ordinance number 483, which is adding public indecency to the code. Andy, do you want to give us a brief summary?
Yes, it's probably better that you just read that yourself, but it's making clear some terms in the code that we thought were necessary related to acts of public indecency. But yes, they relate to no urinating, no defecating, public, exposing genitalia. So we discussed a couple weeks ago. That's not clear in the code, and this is cleared up.
Any comments or questions from council? All right. Same process. We need 2 motions. The first one would be to move to conduct the first reading of ordinance 483. Do I have a motion?
I move to conduct the first reading of ordinance 483, adding section 131.17 to North Plains Municipal Code regarding public indecency.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion on the table by Councilor Page, seconded by Councilor Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. Ordinance number 483 is an ordinance adding section 131.17 to the North Plains Municipal Code regarding public indecency. Now, may I have a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 483?
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 483.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion on the table by Councilor Martinez, seconded by Councilor Peterson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have no new business to discuss this evening. Any unfinished business? City manager report.
Moving along, thank you very much. Bill mentioned earlier that some of the big news last week is we were awarded a state grant, a TGM grant, that's Transportation Growth Management. It's the same grant that we got for our downtown plan. That one was 120,000. This next one that we just were awarded for last week is 210. So that's over $300,000 the state is putting into North Plains for our downtown GB expansion. So I think it's good that they're showing up and we're working with them because they're putting some at least some planning investments into our community, which is good because that's always been one of my bugaboos of not being in Metro. That's good, but they hand out a lot of planning dollars, so it's good that the LCD, I think, in my mind, is help assisting North Plains with some of these large efforts that we're having to go through, being on the edge of the Metro boundary. So that's big news. The other news, of course, is some of you met Steve Miller, our planner. Raise your hand, he's still here. He is on day 4. 3?
Let's see. That was a little-
But you were here all last week. Yeah.
About day 8 now.
Day 8. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, because I was on a portion that week. So day 8, Steve has jumped right in. He's already started, corresponding with residents and developers. We're working a lot with Heather, so it's been great. And then also Doug Keene. Raise your hand. Doug is our rare volunteer. So after the meeting, I would say everyone just introduce yourself and say hello. But if you want, if there's anything, well, I'll just give a little preamble. But I would invite you both to introduce yourselves to them. But Steve has had a few years under his belt in planning, and he was a planner with Bend. He was a rare volunteer himself years ago, so he and Doug already have that kinship. Steve was on the planning commission in Bend. He went to the private sector and has been doing a lot of building and entitlement work there. So he's got experience on both sides. Doug was in the planning and public policy program at University of Oregon. So here's a Doug. We are recruiting for a beaver to balance out the office, but it didn't work out. So another Doug in our midst, if that's okay. But Doug and Steve share some, they cohabitate a space there in the city hall. So it's been great that they can both talk a lot of planning principles, and Doug has a lot of energy and ideas, and he's going to go to a Main Street Oregon conference here pretty soon to get a lot of inspiration, and we're encouraging him, go forth, try some stuff, recruit some volunteers, work with community partners, and let's see what happens, see what works. If something doesn't work, it's okay, learn from it, and we'll try something else. But Doug's got a lot of energy, and we're glad to have him here as well. So, Doug and Steve. In the next week or two, I think it's the next digital newsletter. Actually, we'll have an article going on introducing the community of several of our new employees. So I meant to do that last month when I was on vacation, so we're taking care of that this month. So those are the kind of things that are new that I haven't included in the last couple of reports. I'm going to be at the League of Oregon Cities and Oregon City Managers Association meetings in the next couple of days, and I think the mayor will be there too. So we'll be down there repping lights, and I'm going to meet with the Energy Trust to look at getting some solar panels in our new public works building. to see if we can get some incentives and tools for that when we're down there. So I mean, something we're looking at doing in the Public Works building. And hopefully here in the next month or so, we'll give you a little mock-up of a pre-design of what that building's shaping up to be. Good so far. So with that, any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I've got a couple. Since we were talking about the UGBs, where are we at on UGBs now?
The urban growth boundary UGB study. We're well, as we sort of elaborated earlier, the EOA, the economic opportunities analysis, is kind of what we've been waiting on to finish that up. So the that document will be to the Planning Commission because we needed to make an amendment to it. DLC demanded that, so we're requested that, I should say. We're going through that. That'll be at the Planning Commission next week. And then that means that document will be back to the City Council at the following meeting in October 17th will be a little too early. First meeting in November. We can get that adopted. We'll have another Project Advisory Committee meeting, a PAC meeting for the UGB in November. I think we're anticipating maybe 2 more of those meetings. The next meeting is really going to be looking at all of the analysis and prioritization and of the growth areas around the in the UGB study area, and having that group make a recommendation really for growth and direction, and then tying that up at the beginning of next year and then submitting that to the state and the county for adoption sometime in the first quarter of next year. So still moving ahead. I had to wait a lot for the EOA, but the return for waiting that long should work out in the end.
So have we, because what we're just talked about, are we thinking about more acres or something around 500 still?
For industrial,
Yeah,
we're still around that area unless that task force came forth and said, yeah, but Bill, you've been in this.
Yeah, Councilor Smith, so our acreage need has not changed. What we're moving forward with is a need for 500 and roughly 50 acres of industrial land, okay? What's happened though with that task force is, number one, they're aware of what we're doing and they're aware that we're the only jurisdiction expanding significantly to add industrial land anywhere near Oregon's high-tech industry. We're the only
game in town.
Only game in town. That is correct. The state may come along. The state right now is mapping sites that are suitable for that statewide, but it's going to boil down to Washington County in great measure because that's where the businesses are and that's where the workers are, for that matter. They're mapping sites statewide. They're mapping sites whether or not they're in UGBs right now. It's possible. I haven't heard any rumblings, but the way it's going, it's possible. The state could come along and say, North Plains, we need even more acreage in your UGB because everything you have is right near a freeway and right near Hillsborough. Then there would be a procedure to potentially add even more land. But right now, we're sticking with and further supported by their evidence to move forward with the same acreage.
Okay.
Question.
Second question,
Question 1. Yep.
talking about the water tank, not what you're thinking. I walk by that quite a bit. We got a lot of dead trees planted there with the water system. So what's the plans on that?
I'll need to inspect those. We'll just
They
talk
look
to the
like they're-
contractor that planted them.
Do what?
We'll just have to talk to the contractor that planted them.
It looks like there's a watering system, tall watering system, is that what that is?
Mhm.
Are they getting watered at all?
Where are the trees located? Along the
In the
sidewalk?
berm?
Oh, on the berm? Oh, there shouldn't be any trees growing on there. It's going to be clover and some low bushes, I believe. But I'd have to go back and review the plans. I don't exactly know. I don't want to give you.
Yeah, if you look at the burn there, where it goes up, there's probably what, dozen plus trees that were planted I think most of it is gone.
Okay. Yeah, to be frank, I haven't paid attention to that lately, so I have to go take a look.
It's a kind of an eyesore, but
Okay. I'll give that a look, thanks.
it's okay. One other one. Have we ever thought about, I mean, we talked about Columbia Bank with their electronic reader board. Have we looked at? Nothing's been done there. Have we ever thought about doing our own? Again, I'll bring that up again.
Counselor Smith, you have, I have not investigated that. I've been waiting for a couple things to take place. And frankly, maybe precedents. One is trying to develop the Glencoe property. Perhaps there's a way to publicize some events and information there as part of that development. And then two, the downtown plan as well, that may come with, as we look at signage, wayfinding, maybe there's something that says, you know, a reader board there would be good too. I guess I'm not, I haven't heard excited. Well, I personally, and this is just anecdotal, I'm thinking how I get my information. It's not from reader boards. Maybe people do that, but that was where we tried to use social media or the app, the website, newsletters, and things like that to get information to people. I don't know if a reader board is the high priority in that mix, but I'm willing to be convinced. So,
Okay.
Okay.
I just know when we do certain events, for some reason at all, people still don't get the information.
Well, and
I'm not sure what
yeah,
the answer is to that.
there's a reader board across the street from us at the Christian church, and they will publicize some things for us, but it's not very big. I don't know how many people read it. I doubt they have any good data on that either, but one does exist. We could probably do a better job of, hey, because Brenda will always do that. Could you, you know, put this on there too? I need to do a better job of that.
We need a town crier. Hear you.
A comp,
What are you doing? Would you like to volunteer?
As a town crier? Yeah, I'll do that.
and one more. Since I thought about it, Veteran Day, Veteran Day's coming up. Is there a process that somebody's doing that already?
I'm sorry.
Veterans Day, November?
Cindy Hurst and I had a meeting on that 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's on my to-do list to reach out to her again. Doug, if you meet with her tomorrow, bring up Veterans Day, just so we can get a planning meeting together.
And I think Valerie Webb might be really interested.
There's several people that are interested, yep, but I just haven't spoken to anyone for 2 weeks on it. But yes, it's also on my to-do list, and I was thinking about it just today, that I need to reach out and convene something, so. Maybe I'll work with the mayor and Valerie and
Maybe,
others to get a
yeah,
planning meeting.
maybe Counselor Smith would like to help volunteer. And coordinate the day. We can talk offline.
I am a veteran, I guess I'm the it.
There you go. Any other questions for Andy?
I have one more. And Andy, this is a small thing, so you're going to forget something you know right now. Just this is going to be a reminder. Last 3 years, I've come to say, hey, you know, we've done the leaf pickup far too early. And they're like, oh, well, we just mirror what the Hillsborough does, and so be it. We can't control the weather. True, we can't control the weather, but we can't control the dates we schedule. Now, the leaf pickups for the areas in the cities comes out and scoops the leaves. Has been about 2 or 3 weeks too early. They come out and they sweep dust and then they leave and like, hey, we did it. And then the leaves fall. You kind of missed it. I was wondering, I know we can't schedule the weather and we can't schedule the leaves fall, but can we schedule the date that we would do this maybe 3 weeks later? That's something to know about, because this is a small issue. You're doing big issues as a small little note, but I don't know who's doing the scheduling now. But whatever it is,
Yeah.
push back to you.
Well, good, well-timed question. I had one public works director interview today, 2 more on Friday. So that person will be here to take those questions in the future. But I know the guys I think they're scrapping the zones and they're just going to do citywide first week in November and then 3 weeks later at the end of November, if I think I heard that right. That's going to be the plan to take care of kind of what you're talking about.
So twice around.
Pardon?
So twice around, right?
Yeah, spaced out three weeks and doing it a little bit later.
Yeah, because last time it was just by zones and just far too early. All right, cool.
I have one questions. Go.
Yeah. Amy, just want to say thank you for being so proactive and speedy with reaching out to Washington County regarding the West Union speed and what can be done there. And I'm just hoping you might be able to shed a little light onto how that conversation went.
Well, nothing as new has happened since I gave that update, but we had a meeting of our city engineer, myself, and the county engineer to go look at those curved areas of concern. And then also discussing the speed limit, lowering the speed limit to 40 miles per hour. That is in process right now. That request is going through the channels right now. As far as the curved areas, we looked at a couple different options. And right now, the county operations division, it was a cryptic message, but he said, yep, ops will take care of that. But it was going to start with some delineators, about 30 or 35 of them, which would be kind of the taller flexi delineators that are reflected in, line all of that curved area as a start. They've got, certain misgivings and things that they don't want to do, and probably experience with certain techniques, frankly. They say, yeah, we did that, and it didn't work at all, just didn't have any tip of that. So we agreed, okay, we'll start there and see what that looks like. But it was, I think it amounted to 35 to 40 delineators, at least along a long section to start with. We discussed other things like paintings on the road, maybe some arrows or rubble strips, things like that, but they wanted to start with those, see if that helps, and then we can go to step 2 if we need further measures.
Thank you.
Well, related to that though, the police chief and I had a discussion about some other areas in town, and we may have a future meeting, future recommendation about other areas for a permanent speed limit. North Avenue, as you know, during construction is 25 miles per hour, but at some point, if we wanted to keep it there, we need to have a resolution to make that permanent. Maybe we'll get stop sign also at that intersection to make it a 4-way stop, because right now it's 2-way. It'll eventually be commercial, mixed use apartments, a lot of activity here, so probably another good place to do that stop signs. And it's the we're working with the contractor. Don't worry, in case this is going to come up. Stop signs on Main and Commercial, that's coming. That next year, we're hoping that intersection is under construction with bulb outs, and it's part of the gas tax thing. So right now, we're trying to look at where can we put them. They'll just be interim, but we don't want them to just be plowed over. So we place them a bit strategically, knowing that, all right, we'd like to keep them where we are in the future too. Because when you got a bulb out, when you make the curve bigger to make it safer, you basically take, it's a width of a parking spot. So we gotta just figuring that out, and we're gonna include that in some other work, other traffic safety work around town. So we're just trying to bundle working projects together to do that. So more on that.
Speaking of North Street, thank you, Terry. Speaking of North Street, I wanted to ask about I take walks over there all the time, and recently my wife's cat across the street got hit by a car, and I was clipping the cat, scrubbing it down so she wanted to see the spider marks. People come up to me and say, hey, my cat got hit here too. And many people went, oh wow, look at this. And that made me stop and actually look at the traffic. And those cars haul down that street, and they're moving. And there's a little speed bump they made there. I see cars hit, bam, and almost jump. Oh, look at that, it's pretty sweet. I was wondering, what would it take to get a speed bump in kind of closer to the school? Because that's gonna be, there's gonna be houses on the other side, it's gonna be crossing. And there's a lot of, if you go down north, this time of year, there's a lot of the sunrise is right there at the exact same time that kids are going to school and such. Some kind of jumping debate besides making a rule like, you guys shouldn't speed, make the time, let's make it slower, besides doing that. Can you put some kind of physical, like maybe it's a couple more speed bumps on north right there? What would that take? Because cars do slow down when they finally hit that speed bump.
Oh, yeah.
So,
We're kind of in a weird spot right now because of all of the traffic engineering basically on that road is going to eventually be meant for cars to slow down when things are built the way they should be, because there's a median there. There will be on-street parking there. There's obviously that raised intersection there. That's what we're talking about, putting some stop signs in there. There will be a crossing signal at the end where the school entrance is. So there's a little bit of a curve in the road too. All these things are meant to slow down traffic, like it's treated more like a local street. And if we make that 25 miles per hour, it should act that way. Doesn't mean people always will. Speed bumps, well, I'm a traffic engineer, but I know they try to do other things without having to do speed bumps because people really actually hate speed bumps, especially people who live near them. They're bunch of all day. In a perfect world, I'd like to see how that street functions before we went that direction. I hear what you're saying, but all I can say right now is, control that and make sure no one's there, but it's not. Yeah, he knows. But that's one of the areas where we want to deploy a flashing speed sign going on Sunset Ridge. So that's one of the things we want to kind of update the council on.
Yeah.
So speed bumps, yes. I do want to give that road the benefit of the doubt, though, that maybe all the things that it's going to eventually look like a speed bump won't be necessary. But it may not be satisfying.
all right, well, speed bumps are a physical deterrent, so they will work. So that's, besides, psychologically.
Yeah,
and-
and they make the rubberized, large, removable speed bumps too, sometimes have an effect. So I'd be interested in that. I see those a lot in school parking lots. So they're not a physical chunk of asphalt that are there for eternity. It can be removable and, so that's something to explore too, till the road is built out. I mean, in theory, it should be street trees are big, on-street parking, stop signs, lower speed limit, all those things make it a little bit slower.
They still speed on North.
Well, it's very
Well,
fast.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me because for years and years it was 40 and it still doesn't look the way it's going to be. So it's probably old habits are hard to break.
Yeah.
So I get that.
That and running stop signs. That's for another conversation. Any other comments or questions for Andy? Council updates. I know recently we went to the Fern Hill Natural Treatments Clean Water Services had an event, and Councilor Papen, Councilor Smith, and myself, spouses, we went on the Fern Hill tour. If you haven't been over there to walk around and look at that particular area, it's a beautiful area. Lots of birds. It's just really beautiful. They take a lot of care to that particular area. But what I did not know is that our wastewater actually goes to Rock Creek. And they haven't set a date yet for a tour of the Rock Creek system. But when that comes out, I'm sure Joe Gall will have it in his newsletter. And if you see that and you're interested, definitely sign up for that tour and go check that out. I think it would be interesting. But the Fern Hill was really nice. Come to find out that 2 of the employees for Clean Water Services actually live here in North Plains. So we were very well represented, which was kind of cool.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
We were guests. The people that should have been there from Banks and Gaston and Cornelius and Forest Grove weren't there.
Right.
So I think we represented ourselves really well. And I did hear the mayor of Forest Grove kind of grumble that his councilors didn't show up. So I'm still looking forward to ever meeting a counselor from Banks.
Yeah.
But I think as a group, we do a great job representing ourselves. I think the mayor does a great job too, better than most.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Smith. I appreciate that. And speaking of representative, you know, we have the chili cook-off coming up. And I know the NPEA has volunteers, but if any of you want to come and not just to eat, but to maybe, you know, be a volunteer reliever, we would definitely appreciate that. It's always a good time. I know that we're really trying to talk that up. And hopefully we'll, you know, get back in the swing of things here and have a good time. So that's coming up. And as Andy said, we'll be in Bend for the League of Oregon Cities annual conference. He has a city manager thing. I know that I have a Oregon Mayor's board meeting as well, but we'll be there representing North Plains Strong, so that'll be great. And I don't think I have anything else to report. Anybody else?
One question for Andy?
Yeah.
What's the expected completion date out here on the fishing meeting?
My question is over, Councilor.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. End of this year, that's if materials show up.
Oh, show up, okay.
Originally, the playground equipment is going to, we ordered it early, it's going to show up in mid-October. We heard there could be a 2-month delay on that, but they're doing all they can.
It's good.
Putting in the casings for footings for certain equipment, so it does arrive, they can just pop it in. The thing is, though, they're also waiting on some of their parts for the storm system too. It's just kind of the way the world is this year. So we're still hoping for the end of this year. And that's the best I know right now.
Thank you.
Great. If there's nothing else, then I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting this evening at 8:07. Thank you, everyone.